Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to our first adult speaker series. It's called Encounter this year, and we're going to be covering highlighting sacraments. But to give a foundation in that, in this, that's really great. In our year, we have McCauley, and he's going to do our first presentation, and I'm just really excited. I know some of you prayed already for, when you were here getting ready for the meal and things like that. I'm just going to ask that we center ourselves in prayer and pray for our time together, that we can grow and learn in our faith, and pray for Al and his presentation, and that the Holy Spirit guides his heart and his words to help us all grow closer to Christ. And then just a special prayer for peace in the world, that we are instruments of that peace through our words and through our actions. And we pray for peace throughout all of the war-torn areas of the world right now. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Al. Al is the Director of Adult Formation at St. Anthony on the Lake Parish in Pewaukee. He taught theology and history at Pius High School in Milwaukee for 24 years and served as a religious studies adjunct for Cardinal Stritch University. Al is the creator and host of the Catholic weekly web series Fish on Fridays, and he is a frequent speaker throughout the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. I have to say, he's very popular in our house. My husband knows. I know when it's Friday because he's got this theme music, and I know my husband's watching Al, and he's like, "Want to come and watch?" So it's a great Fish on Fridays. It's just wonderful. I highly recommend it. Without further ado, Al McCauley.
Hi everybody, how are you tonight? Good. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Good. I have a big mouth, so hopefully I won't need the microphone. Well, welcome. I'm always happy to be here. This is not my first time I've been here, and I know you're going to be talking about or hearing about or learning more about sacraments this year, and this is the kickoff of that. So what I want to do is kind of bridge the gap between the sacraments we talk about and we normally associate with that building upstairs, the church, with what we do at home. And so that's why I called this talk the domestic church, because what we do at home is very important. In fact, it's vital to what happens here. They both feed each other. Both church and home feed each other. And so if you notice this little diagram on the screen, that's what I want to start with. It's like a metaphor, but it's a real-life metaphor. Okay? So the top image that you see up there is the Basilica of St. Clement I, who was a pope. And it was built in Rome. And it was built, and one that we have know currently, it was built in the 12th century, so it's been around a while, okay? Now, in order to build that building in the 12th century, they had to get rid of the building that was there before it, which is that building, which had been around since the 4th century. So they had to make way. You know what it is, you get rid of something and then you build on that spot. You with me on that? What they found in the 12th century when they were building this church, that it wasn't just enough to get rid of the ruins, if you will, of the old church. They had to dig into the ground because they needed to make a foundation. They needed to have pilings, they needed to have support because they knew this new basilica was going to be very large, and it had to be supported in the ground. And so what they did was they had to excavate all the way down into the ground. And what they found were 1st century buildings that they didn't know were there. These 1st century buildings were separate units, and they came to realize that they were houses. And in these houses, in the artifacts that they found little indications of Christianity. They found crosses. They found simple mosaics of religious themes. And it made them realize that the 1st century buildings were house churches. So if you're familiar with church history at all, in the first few centuries of our existence as a people, Christianity was persecuted. Christians were rounded up, they were imprisoned, they were killed. Churches would have been destroyed, so they weren't built. So where did people worship? They worshipped in their homes. And they were called house churches. And I love this metaphor because what it tells me is the grand buildings we call churches really have their foundation in what happens at home. The home is not a separate church from what happens up here in your church. The home is an extension of it. And in fact, it's the foundation of it. I would go so far as to say everything that we do on Sunday here at Mass or any of the sacraments, none of them are going to really be as powerful or impactful if you don't have the home church to live it out. That's my claim. That's what I'm going to talk about today a little bit. And the Catholic Catechism talks about this. They call it the domestic church. I highlighted the word. You can read the whole thing if you want, but the real important part is that middle line. That the Catholic Catechism says the family home is rightly called the domestic church. In fact, it's going to go so far as to say that if you want to live out that domestic church, the best example you can look to is the Holy Family. The best example you can look to is the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph together. And they set the example for it. The Catechism goes on further to say that parents have the responsibility, the first responsibility, to educate their kids. Have you ever been to a baptism? And at some point, maybe you've had your kids baptized, the priest will ask you this question. You're going to be the first and best catechist of your child. Do you understand what you are undertaking? And every parent says what? Yes. We do. I have 3 children. My wife and I have 3 kids. No way. There's no manual. There's no manual. It's experience, you know? And if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. But the Catechism is clear on this. The last line, the home is well suited for the education and the virtues. What we do in our homes is every bit as important as what we do at Mass. In fact, Mass is easy. It's 1 hour out of your week. How often are you in your home, relatively speaking? A heck of a lot more, right? You have a lot more opportunity at home to be a Christian, to experience the virtues at home with people that you don't always get along with well. Am I right with that? It's not always the easiest. The people you have to get along with the most because you live with aren't always the easiest to like for whatever reason. All right. Because we're talking about homes, I want to ask you a question. Pop culture reference here. I love using pop culture references because they're not separate from our faith. If we see them through the lens of our faith, I tend to think we see Christ in them. We can see God in them. So I'm going to ask you a question. Whose home is this?
Simba.
Lion, you all recognize that, right? It's the Lion King, right? It's Pride Rock. You've all seen this movie?
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be a time when if I was to talk about this, maybe the people won't. This came out when my wife and I have 3 kids. They're all adults. They're out of college. They're all in their 20s. They don't live at home anymore. But I think my oldest one in particular was born and growing up right when this was out. And so it was, we watched this all the time. You have it memorized pretty much. So this scene should be recognizable to you, right? This is an iconic scene from the movie. If there's one scene from the movie that most people remember, it's this. There are probably more, but this is probably the one that I think most people would see. If you've seen the movie, are there underpinnings of, does it resemble anything that we do here in our church?
Baptism.
Yeah, doesn't it? If you see the movie, you know that, Rafiki, that's the monkey. The Rafiki, puts something on his forehead and sprinkles some dust on him. There's some kind of ritual, and then he lifts him up and I don't know how baptism is done here. If Father Joy holds up a baby when he's baptized or not. Oh man, our priest, I go to St. Anthony on the Lake, Father Tony lifts the babies up. And they're naked, butt naked. And they're wet because they're just in that. I'm like, oh, please don't drop that baby. You know what I mean? I'm just so afraid that's going to happen at some point. Anyway, this is a very baptismal kind of scene. And if you know the movie, Simba goes astray, doesn't he? At some point, Simba goes astray. And it's not important why, but he goes astray. To the point where he runs away, he leaves home for years. Right? Does he ever come back? He does. And the reason he comes back, I would suggest, is because his home environment gave him the infrastructure, was church to him enough that he knew that he could go back, that he knew what was right when the rubber hit the road. Okay? Now I stand in front of you as somebody, as I said, who has 3 kids. My kids are really good kids. They're really good people. They're caring, they're loving, they're great kids. None of them go to church. Okay? I'm assuming by some of the nodding heads I'm seeing that you can relate to this. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You have kids or grandkids that, if they're adults maybe, they don't go back to church for whatever reason. They're good kids, but maybe they're not doing it. And I pray for that. My wife and I pray for that. And I keep thinking at some point, I'm hoping and praying that at some point, they're going to have had enough of a foundation at that home church that we provided that they're going to see the wisdom in it. That God's grace is going to work to them to come back to it. So if you're sitting here thinking, well, yeah, this is great, pie in the sky, my kid doesn't like going to church. My point is, keep providing that foundation. Keep giving that foundation. Because you'll never know how much it will come back, and they will come back to it. And so that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm praying for. This is what I would say. Just as an aside, but kind of related. Is there 3 things I think that it's important, and my kids would be able to hopefully articulate this. There's 3 things about our faith that's important to instill in our kids, among all the others. But at the basis, it's this. To know that God loves them, that they are loved. That's important, right off the bat. No matter where they're at or what happens to what they've done, they're loved. Number 2, they can always come back. They can always come home. And the third is, their faith is there to help them whenever they need it, especially in times of trouble. Now, my wife and I said that to our 3 kids all the time. We said, you've disappointed me, but I'll never not love you. Think about your kids right now in your mind. Can you ever not love them? Rhetorical question. You're always I don't say, heck no. I'm hoping that your answer is, yeah, you know, they have disappointed me, or they may disappoint me, but I can't not love them. You know? We've told our kids they're all out of the house. We've all said, something goes south on you, man, come back. You always have a home with us. And we've said, you know, when something happens, this happened to my son this past summer, dated a girl for almost 2.5 years. She was the one. She called him and broke up. It was so devastating. And you know what? We said, you know what? We're here for you. We're here for you. You know, whatever that bad happens, we're here. Now, we do that because why? That's what our faith is for. And all of us have that gift too. You know, our God says those things to us all the time. You're loved. You're always welcome back. And it will help you when you need it the most. And so our faith, like our families, are very important. They're in track, you know, in sync with each other, if you will. So based on this theme, I don't know if you've ever been any place like a pro sporting event and have seen this theme playing out in a Simba cam. Have you ever heard of a Simba cam? Some of you are, thank you. A Simba cam is, you know, like what a kiss cam is, like at a Bucks game or something, and you sit next to someone and it's a kiss cam, you're supposed to kiss them, right? Hopefully you're sitting next to somebody you like. But the Simba cam is if you have a kid, you're supposed to lift them up like Rafiki did and hold them up, and then you get your, you know, picture on the big monitor. There you go. At Miller Park. There's, you know, hold up the kid high. Okay? Now my oldest daughter and her husband and her family, they live in Fond du Lac. They're teachers in the school district up there. And they have a minor league baseball team up there called the Fond du Lac Dock Spiders. My wife and I have gone up there a number of times over the years to watch their games. Well, they have a Simba cam. We were up there one summer when the Simba cam was on, and we were with our son, who was, you know, who was at that time, he was probably about 19 or 20. He's about 6'2", and I'm about 5'8.5", you know. And it's Simba cam, and it's like, we got to get on the thing. So I'm trying to look, I'm like, are we on the screen? I couldn't turn around. He's trying to look back. We never made it to the big screen. How are you not putting that? I mean, come on, we're trying. I don't know. It's disappointing. What are you going to do? All right. Talking about homes, it's very important we understand that the domestic home, that our church, our home is the domestic church. What we do there should identify us to others. So let's look at some homes. Let's look at some famous homes from TV and movies and see if you can identify where they're from. You understand what I'm saying? All right.
Brady Bunch.
Please tell me everybody's old enough here to remember the Brady Bunch. You all remember the Brady Bunch. Okay, good. Yes, this is the Brady Bunch. That's their home. When I was a kid, I always wanted to live in that home. I loved the steps. They were like floating. There was nothing. It was just kind of like, oh, I loved it. I loved Mike's den, the dad's den, right? Oh, good stuff. Okay, how about this one? Simpsons. Never got into the Simpsons personally, but yeah, it's pretty iconic. You see it on commercials all the time, right? Okay. Interesting. You people watch too much TV. Yeah, Home Alone. I thought I'd throw you a curveball because the first two are TV shows, and this was, yeah, Home Alone. This is the Kevin McCallister trying to defend his home. The next one? No, not Walden. Look at the bottom left, the sign in the bottom left.
Christmas Story.
Yeah, Christmas Story. You know what that movie, right? The kid wants a BB gun. Yeah, I can't tell if there's a lamp in the front with the leg, you know, the leg lamp. That's a Christmas Story, right? Waltons. I should have thought of that one. Waltons. That would. How many of you remember? Or Little House on the Prairie. I could have thought of that too. All right.
Psycho.
Not Addams Family.
House from Psycho?
Yes, it is. Psycho. The movie Psycho. Very good. Excellent. You can see the woman's silhouette in the window. I never saw that in my life until about 2 summers ago we watched it. I don't know why, what possessed it. It wasn't even Halloween, but we watched it. And it's like I don't know when this came out, late 1950s, 1960? It was like a 1950s version of the TV show Criminal Minds. That's what it was. How about this one?
Ferris
Very good. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And this isn't Ferris Bueller's home. It's Cameron's home, right? Exactly. Right? It's the garage of his dad with all his sports cars. So it's a lot like mine. Friends, very good. You ever wonder how those 6 people lived in really nice New York lofts?
Right.
And how hard they would work? You know? It's interesting. Yeah, Friends, that's what that is. Last one. Full House. Yeah, you people know your sitcoms, that's for sure. My point in doing this exercise is to know, it's interesting how quickly we can identify these TV shows, these families. And if I was to ask you, if I go back and tell me something about Full House, you could probably say something, right? If I say, tell me something about what was the one before Friends, you could probably tell me something about it, right? The home identifies, in these cases, something about the show, something about the characters. And it begs the question, if someone was to walk into your home, not a judgment, just a question. If someone was to walk into your home, would they recognize it as a home of a Christian? Would they recognize it as a Catholic home? Again, rhetorical question, And I don't mean just because you have, a statue or something like that. I mean because of how you live, because of how you treat each other. That's even more important than maybe what it looks like. All right. This is a picture of my spiritual home. This is St. Anthony on the Lake, where my wife and I belong. Okay, this is our church. And the altar would be to the right. You can't see it. I purposely didn't put it in there because I wanted you to see something about how everyone's sitting. And I'm going to make a point about this later. But can you tell how everyone is sitting? And can you remark about it? What do you think is going on? Tell me about the geography of how they're sitting. Yeah, it's a semicircle. They're in a semicircle. And it's interesting because we're kind of forced to look at each other. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But it makes Mass potentially uncomfortable because you have to recognize there are other people there. And it should really prime the pump because, like I said, sometimes we go home and it's not easy to live out our faith. The easiest part about being a Catholic is that 1 hour I spend at Mass every week. You know why? Because there's like-minded people. They're all saying the Our Father anyway, so it's not like I'm sticking my neck out. They're all making the sign of the cross and genuflecting or kneeling at the same time. There's no problem for me to do that. I'm not embarrassed by that. I have no problem doing it, no qualms about it, because everyone's doing the same thing. What really makes it difficult is when I leave, and now I have to practice my faith somewhere where I might not have that support. Where I might not have people listening to me or care about what I'm doing. That makes it a little bit more difficult. In fact, what we do here is talking the talk. What we do here in our families is walking the walk. When we have difficult conversations, when we pray together because something bad has happened. That's not as easy. So a lot of our home isn't just what it looks like, but it's really what we do in terms of our relationship with each other. And St. Mother Teresa knew this. She was a very wise woman. I think a lot of people look at Mother Teresa as someone who was very caring, yes, very giving, incredibly generous with her time and what she did. But she was very smart, too. She was on the ball. I love this line. If you want peace in the world, go home and love your family. Notice what she says here. If you want peace in the world, go home and love your family. That it starts with our families. It starts in our homes. With people you don't want to forgive because you're mad at them. I get it. It's true. It happens. I'm mad because somebody keeps taking the last ice cube and doesn't fill up the tray again. Right? Isn't it little things like that that tick us off? But it's interesting because she connects something here. The house church, the home, the family is really the key to what happens in the world. When we look at the world problems today, and boy, are there plenty, huh? We look at the world problems, isn't it easy for us to say, why don't those darn politicians do something about this? Why is that country doing that? It doesn't make sense that they would lob bombs at each other. It's very easy for us to do that, myself included, to point and say, why don't they fix it up? And what Mother Teresa is saying is none of us are off the hook. We all have a part to play in this. How we raise our families is really important because they will go out in the world to decide whether or not they should spread hatred or love. Mother Teresa's onto something here. All right, more pop culture references. Do you recognize these two guys?
Sure.
Who are they? Property Brothers. I have no idea what their names are, but I do know they're the Property Brothers. You can tell me their names are Bill and Jackson. I wouldn't know. Do you know what their names are? I honestly don't know.
Sure, Jonathan and Scott.
Do you know which one is which?
Jonathan is the one in the blue shirt,
Okay.
and the other one is...
They're twins though, correct?
They're twins.
Yeah. You'll know this one then too. Who are these people? And what's their show? Do you remember their show? Yeah, Fixer Upper. So you're people who like HGTV shows. Now, I don't watch a lot of TV. I really don't. My wife and I don't, but my wife loves these shows. She is like borderline addicted to these shows. She watches all of these home improvement shows, and there's a whole, it's like, isn't it HGTV Network that does this? And it's just one after another, and they have some different angle. You know, one's in Indianapolis, one's in Arkansas or something. They're all over the place and they're rehabbing. And I have no skills whatsoever, you know, to do that. Change a light bulb is about the extent of my knowledge with that. So when they come in, they're talking about doing this, that, and the other thing. I'm always kind of envious. I always find it funny too when they have the couple that says, you know, what do you want to do with your house? And they talk about their renovation budget. You know, it's like, well, my wife's a stay-at-home mom, and I'm a part-time beekeeper, and our budget is $1.2 million. It's like, wait a minute, how are you getting that kind of cash with Soletta? Anyway, that's my theory. Anyway, we have whole TV shows and networks devoted to improving our homes, right? Rebuilding houses, rehabbing them, doing all that kind of stuff, show after show after show. And I wonder sometimes if we shouldn't have shows that help us to know how to build and keep our families strong. So it's not just the walls, it's not just the plumbing or the mid-century vibes or whatever. I want the right backsplash for my kitchen, whatever. But how our families should interact. I think that's clearly more important. I know plenty of people who live in really nice houses who aren't happy. You know what this place is? You ever shop there?
Yep.
I've been there twice in my life. IKEA did an online survey a few years ago, right before the holidays. This is legit. They did a survey and they asked several questions by their own admission because they wanted to prime the pump and get sales. But they wanted to ask questions about what people thought about their living situation. And these are the findings. They said 29%, almost a third of the people they surveyed don't feel at home where they live. 53% don't get a sense of belonging from their residential space. Now, I don't know if that means like a condo association, you don't like your neighborhood, I'm not sure. But 53% don't feel a sense of belonging. And 33% feel that the residence does not feel that their residence provides a sense of security. So what they found was, hey, if you want comfort, you want to feel belonging, and you want security, you come to IKEA and you can shop. And we'll hook you up with all of those things. That was their deal. My question is this, and I'd like you to really think about this. And if you're sitting, hopefully you're sitting by someone, you can just talk 60 seconds, nothing overly threatening or anything, but just have this conversation about, if you had to state them, what core needs would you identify for feeling at home? In other words, I really want my home to feel like a home. What are the core needs you need for that to happen? Make sense? Do you understand the question? Can you take like 60 seconds, just talk to someone quickly about what you think that would be, and then I'll call you back. All right, it's been about a minute. Anybody, what did you talk about at your tables? Anybody want to talk about that? What core needs would you identify to feel truly at home? Anybody want to start us out? It only takes one to start the ball rolling. Please.
We said belonging,
Yeah.
and comfort,
Okay.
some sense of organization. Security came in there, but I think belonging was probably the primary.
Okay, good, excellent, yeah. So IKEA was right on, the people they surveyed, huh? Makes you want to shop there, doesn't it? Anybody else? Oh, come on. You weren't all talking about the Packer game, were you? It's on tonight, after this, so you'll have plenty of time to get home to watch it, so. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Like pictures of my family or like, familiar
Yeah.
pieces and things like that.
You know, it's always like the question, like if your house is on fire and you only had like 5 minutes, what would you take? You know?
Yeah.
Pictures can't be reproduced, right? I mean, you can't take pictures of your kids when they were 4 anymore, if they're older than 4, for instance. So yeah, that's good. Anybody else? One more, come on.
Chris said security, is that what I'm talking about?
Security, okay.
Security and safety, like
Yeah.
safety, and
Yeah.
talked about laughter and
Yeah.
having fun.
Yeah, laughter, having fun, all that's very good. Communication, what about that? Trust?
Oh, yeah.
Communication, trust, those are big ones. For me personally, those are the first two that come up as communication and trust. To feel truly at home, that I can say what I can say if I need to say something, and I trust that it'll be kept there and treated with respect and vice versa. Those things aren't easily, remedied if they're lost. So those are important too. Just something to think about. Maybe think about this throughout the course of the week. What really makes me, what core values make my home the home that it is? What is it that's really important when the rubber hits the road? We have some examples or some clues from Scripture, from people in Scripture who have talked about this without mentioning IKEA, believe it or not. Joshua in the Old Testament. When it comes right down to it, we have a choice to make as a country. Who are Israel? He's saying, Israel, you have a choice to make. There are all kinds of gods out there, foreign gods, vying for your attention. A lot of people who want you to believe them. And you have to decide this day what you're going to believe. And Joshua says, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Now, household. He doesn't say as for me. He says household. This is a communal thing. It's a family thing. It's an important communal event. We don't go to Mass by yourself. There's a community. And your home is that extension of that community. And how do you serve the Lord? You serve the Lord by serving each other. By serving the people in your families. That's really the key. Every time you wipe a snotty nose from a kid, every time you pick up a sock, every time you wash a dish, you're really serving them. And you're serving the Lord by extension. And you're living out what we say we believe every hour, 1 hour a week when we go to Mass. In the New Testament, John's Gospel, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. The Word is capitalized. It's referring to Jesus. Jesus was born into a family, Mary and Joseph, but he chose people around him, the apostles, the disciples. He had a communal sense. But I love the word dwelling. Do you know what a tabernacle is? Do you know where your tabernacle, this is not a meat trivia question, I'm not going to tell Father Joy. Do you know where your tabernacle is in your church? The word tabernacle means to dwell. And we call it that because we believe that the real presence of Christ is in that Eucharist, that Jesus is dwelling there. But by extension, think about what we do every Sunday when we go to Mass. We receive that real presence. And you know what then? Christ is dwelling in us. So you and I are now tabernacles. We're walking, talking tabernacles. So we have Christ in us. We have to act like it. And the hardest place to do that sometimes, again, is our families. But that's our home. That's what we have to do. That's where we live that out. So that Christ can truly dwell among us. St. Francis of Assisi, whose feast we just celebrated this past week on the 4th of October. Everybody knows his sayings, the peace prayer, and you think about, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. This is a quote I wish everybody knew of Francis. It's 4 words, and it's just beautiful. Every home is Bethlehem. What happened at Bethlehem? 2,000 years ago, what happened at Bethlehem? Anybody? Christ was born in Bethlehem. If every home is Bethlehem, Francis is saying we have to give birth to Christ. Give birth to Christ in our homes. We have to bring him alive in our homes. Not just at Christmas, not just when it feels good, but all the time. That's a really tough challenge. But I just love it. I think it's great. Another instance, have you seen this picture before, this image? On the wall? Have you ever noticed that?
No.
Several years ago, I was a youth minister, and we would do confirmation retreats every year. We had different themes, and one of the years, this is 20 years ago, easily, if not more, one of the themes one year was open the door. What do you notice significant about this image? There's no doorknob. In Revelation chapter 12, Jesus is knocking at the door. He says, behold, I'm knocking at the door. If you open up, I'll come in and eat with you. I'll hobnob with you. I'll be with you. But he says, if you open the door, I'll do that. In this image, there's no doorknob. Jesus will not come in. We have to let him in. We have to open the door for him. We have to invite him in. This is why we go to Mass. We go to Mass to have that presence within us so that we can open the door in other times, at work, at home, when we're with friends, etc. And the best way to do this, or one of the great ways to do this, is something called sacramentals. Now, sacraments, you're going to hear about sacraments all year. Sacraments are signs instituted by Christ. Sacramentals are signs instituted by the church, so they're lesser than. They're not sacraments. But they remind us of sacraments. They predispose us to the grace we'll receive in the sacrament. They kind of prime the pump and get us ready for them. The Catholic Catechism says sacramentals make holy various occasions in life. Now, if you were at Mass, I don't know if you were at Mass yesterday or not, I asked this question because I had a minute to talk. How many of you have a crucifix or a cross anywhere in your house? Raise your hand. That's a sacramental. The cross or the crucifix you have, if it's just one, that's fine. That's what it is. It's a sacramental. My dad and mom, both really hardcore Catholics, I'll just say that. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, okay? 6 kids in 7 years. My parents had 6 kids in 7 years. And 3 girls, they lived in one room, because my parents didn't have a lot of money. They were in one room, and 3 boys in the other, okay? And my dad insisted that every room in the house had a crucifix in it. And we could put up stuff in our room, so I remember as a kid, very specifically remembering having a poster of Walter Payton, running back for the Bears. Do you remember Walter Payton? He's passed away now. My brothers and I had a poster of him on our wall. My sister actually had an Andy Gibb poster. Do you remember Andy Gibb? Some of you are like, well, I don't know that name. He was like a teen idol in the 70s. But my dad said, you can put those up, but you know what? Nothing in the house is going to go higher on the wall than the crucifix. Because there's nothing higher than our faith. He would actually say this. My dad's been passed away for 4 years now. I can tell you right now, if you were at my home right now, you want to come over to my house? If you were at my house right now, you would see that the crucifixes in our rooms, that there's nothing in any of the rooms that's higher than that, because that's what that was the foundation, that was the home church, that was what he preached, and for some reason it stuck in my nimble brain, and that's the way it is, you know? So don't underestimate what you do with your kids, the traditions. Those sacramentals are very important, because at some point they're going to remember them, and they're going to be able to take stock of them. So I'm going to ask you a question. Can you think of other examples of sacramentals? Things that would be religious items that aren't necessarily sacraments, like the Eucharist, that's a sacrament, but something that might remind you of your faith. Can you think of one? Yeah, please.
Well, holy water fountain.
Holy water.
We used to have those in our house.
Absolutely. Some people still have holy water in the house, but certainly you have them here at church. Excellent. Anything else? There's literally dozens of them. Rosary, great. Candles. Pictures. Images. Statues. Yeah, I have, every day I wear a medal. Anybody wear like a crucifix, a cross, a saint medal? Saint Teresa of Lisieux is my favorite saint, has been for years. And so I have this, it's been blessed. I wear it every day. Now let me just say this real quick. This medal has no super power or anything like that. I could get injured, I could get in a car accident. This medal doesn't protect me. There's no magic to it. The medal in and of itself is nothing but a piece of metal. But what it does is it softens me up or predisposes me to something bigger, to a bigger idea. And that idea is what? When I have stress in my life, there are times when I'll actually go like this, like through my shirt, I'll say, okay, I'll feel the metal, and I'll say, okay, give me the humility that you had, you know? Teresa of Lisieux was very humble, and she was a person of prayer. She was a person of a lot of different gifts, and I would think about her. I would think about her example. But this medal does nothing. It's other than to remind me of the deeper spiritual reality. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, doesn't mean we should disrespect. You're not going to kick down that statue or anything. That would be disrespectful because of what it stands for. But in and of itself, that statue of Elizabeth Ann Seton is just wood or whatever it's made of. So, other examples. Ash Wednesday. We'll go to church on Ash Wednesday and get ashes smudged on our forehead. Do you know where the ashes come from? From the palms from the previous year. Palms and ashes. Both of them are sacramentals. I had a priest that told me once that Catholics love coming to Mass on Ash Wednesday and Palm Sunday because they get giveaways. They get takeovers, you know. Incense that we have at Mass, you know, let my prayer rise to heaven like the incense smoke does. Icons or religious images are examples of sacramentals. Again, you don't worship paint and wood. You think that you don't worship any of this. You only worship God. But you look at that and you think, what can I learn about Jesus from this? How can that inspire my faith deeper? Candles. Somebody mentioned candles. Votive candles in particular. But candles at any point really could be, if they're used that way. We use holy oils in churches for confirmations and baptisms and anointing of the sick. Religious medals. I talked about that. Anybody who wears any kind of cross or crucifix. Holy cards. Saint cards. Things like that. Do you know what a scapular is?
Yep.
Some of you might know what that is, or actually wear a scapular as a form of a, it's not a necklace per se, it's made out of cloth, but it's another form of a sacramental. Holy water, someone mentioned that. Rosaries, again, that was mentioned. I have to put St. Teresa up there because, you know, she's my favorite. Statues like that. All of these things aren't because we worship any of them. These sacramentals are there to, again, soften us up to the reality of God's grace. They're to help us live our faith better, to remind us, am I living like St. Teresa? Am I living like Christ would want? Etc. That's why we have them. They're very important. So I'm going to show you a clip from a movie. It's about 2.5 minutes long, and I'm going to ask you, the movie is It's a Wonderful Life. Do you know the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to show you about a 2.5 minute clip from this, and I'm going to ask you a question at the end, so get ready. And the question is this: where do you see in this clip, where do you see sacramentals? Okay, what are they? There's a lot of them, okay? Sacramentals, where did you see? Bread. And what did she do when she got the bread? The lady got the bread. What did she do right away? She kissed it and made the sign of the cross. 2 more sacramentals, depending on how she used them, right? Good. Another sacramental that you saw there. The wine, what was that for? What was it? Well, the bread symbolized what, by the way, did she say? So that its home would never know hunger. Wine was for what? Joy, prosperity. When we talked about that IKEA thing, what are the things that what are the core of things that we want in our families? Joy, prosperity, don't want to go hungry. What was the third thing they got? Salt. So that we'd always know what? Flavor. So life would have flavor, right? Any other sacramentals that you saw in there? We're going to stretch the definition of a sacramental here. But I don't think wrongly.
The community.
The community. Excellent. What happened? Who was there when they were leaving the house? It wasn't just the kids who got in the car with the goat. The whole community was there to say goodbye to them, right? And then they got there, and you saw these kids running up with baseball bat and mitts and stuff. Can you imagine kids saying, hey, we got to stop the ball game. Someone's moving into the house. And they run over because this was a big deal. This was a communal thing. And they all ran it. So there was the gathering of the community was a sacramental in both cases, when they left and when they arrived. Exactly. Do you remember what did you hear when the car was taking off to the point they showed you a brief clip when it was driving down the street? What did you hear? You heard the old man singing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sole mio. Remember that?
Yeah.
That could be a sacramental. He wasn't doing that because he was sad. He was doing that out of joy, out of gratitude. Think about, somebody had a birthday yesterday here in our midst. Sorry. Yesterday, I was here yesterday and her husband said we should all sing the song because it was her birthday.
Mortifying.
But that's a sacramental when you do it that way, when it's out of love. That's what I'm trying to get us to see. When we do these things through the lens of our faith, then they become more sacred. And the more they become sacred, the better chance we have of living out there as sacred people. That's really, and that's what Mother Teresa was talking about. That's how you change the world. So let me give you a few pictures here. Can you tell me where the sacramental is in this picture? You see the crucifix up on the wall, right? That's a sacramental. Can you see another one? Like over here?
Cross.
I can't tell what that is really. There's a light.
Cross.
What if I told you the basket of laundry was a sacramental? I mean, it is service. Is that a basket of laundry, or is that a basket of gratefulness that I have clothes because there are people in the world that don't? I got to make the bed every day. I got a place to sleep. I got 4 walls and a roof. If we look at it through the lens of our faith, then these become sacramentals, and we treat them better and with better respect than those people who are sharing them with us better. And again, the ripple effect can be felt. If we don't change the world as Christians, who will? This is what we're called to do. To recognize Christ in our midst is certainly in that crucifix, but that crucifix makes everything else in that picture holy, I would suggest. How about here? Where do you see the sacramental? The obvious one is what?
The
The Last Supper, right? Can you see any other sacramentals here? Given how I've expanded the definition a little bit. The table. Why? Why the table?
Gathering.
It's a gathering. It's community. It's sharing. Yeah, exactly. What about in the hutch? The dishes. Again, you have to wash the dishes. It's the pain, but you know what? I have food. I'm grateful for that. I have water to clean them. I'm going back because I do this because I love St. Teresa so much. I love this painting of her. St. Teresa of Lisieux lived in the late 1800s. She died in 1897. She was 24 when she died. But she would do little chores around the convent in which she lived. And one of the things she would do is wash the dishes. And after she washed every dish, she would hold it up and she would thank God for it. And why is that important? Let's expand that to our families. Imagine this. Wash the plate not because it's dirty or because you were told to wash it, but because you love the person who's going to use it next. Just the change of your attitude, the intention with which you do something means everything. It means everything. And if we look at that plate as a potential for, as a sacramental, then the whole thing becomes sacred. The whole ritual of eating. In my house, if you were in my house, you'd see this on one of the walls. These are my wife and I at the top, my wife Catherine, and my middle name is Francis. Those are our patron saints. And then our 3 kids, Bridget, Claire, and Joseph is the middle name of our son. But we've had these icons on the wall since the kids were born. When they were born, we put another one up, and we have this there forever. You couldn't help but walk past it on their way to their bedrooms. So even though none of them are regular churchgoers, they all know they're saints because we gave them that. We told them that. We told them who they are. They know when their feast days are because every year on their feast day, I send them a text message say, hey, happy St. Bridget's feast day. It's on February 1st. Claire's August 11th, and Joseph has 2. May 1st and March 19th. He's special. He was the father of Jesus. So the stepfather of Jesus, so he's special. He gets 2. But we, just because they don't necessarily go to church Doesn't mean I'm going to stop being their dad and putting that out in front of them. I don't shove it down their throat, but they know that. And they don't get mad because they know they expect it. It's kind of like, well, that's what dad does. And I hope and pray that at some point this will mean something. And they'll say, you know what? I want that icon, and I'm going to put it in my home. I hope that they do that someday. I would love to break this setup. I really would. I really would. And I have faith it'll happen. In God's time, it'll happen. How many of you have a St. Francis statue in your garden, or have you ever heard of that? You know, people do that a lot. What does this say? This is a sacramental. What does it say? God gives us our food. God nourishes us. The blessings of our sustenance, right? The gifts, the things we eat. So to go back to the catechism says that we should give honor to these sacred objects. Give them a place of honor in the home because of what they remind us of, what they point to potentially. You know, when we think about this, we think about going back to the IKEA thing. Sacramentals provide the comfort. They provide the belonging, the security, the knowledge of what our faith is. They do those things. Sacramentals have that ability. It's not just the physical home. So back to this. I love this picture of my church because we're sitting, as you said, in a semicircle. The Catholic Church says that we believe in something called the real presence of Christ. And you're going to have this, you're going to hear this a lot this year because of the Eucharistic revival that we're in as a church. And when you talk about sacraments, specifically Eucharist, the real presence of Christ, meaning the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus in that thing that looks like a Ritz cracker. But it's not a Ritz cracker. It's not bread. Okay? That's the real presence of Christ. But the church is very clear that there are 4 places that we recognize the real presence of Christ every time we go to Mass. In the person who is the presider, the Latin is in persona Christi, that they represent Christ. They're not Christ, but they represent Christ. So the priest or the bishop, who's ever presiding, in the Eucharist that I just mentioned is the real presence. In the breaking open of the Word, the Scripture is the real presence of Christ. And in each other. We all have that real presence. So if you've ever been to a Mass like Holy Thursday or Easter, and there's a whole lot of incensing going on, next time you're at a Mass like that, there are 4 things that are always incensed. Keep your eyes open. They're going to incense the table, the altar, because the real presence of Christ. They're going to incense the ambo, where the Word is read, because that's the breaking open, the real presence of Christ in Scripture. The deacon or one of the priests, they're going to incense each other because the real presence of Christ there. And then they're going to go out, they're going to bow, and they're going to incense all of us. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because the real presence of Christ is there. When you sit in a church like this, you're forced to look at each other and say, Christ is there. What I often do is say, I can't believe she's wearing that to Mass today. But what I should be saying is, that is the real presence of Christ. Where else have you seen a church like this? You have it here. You have it here. What a gift this is. When you sit at Mass, you can look across. If you're ever distracted, I don't think I'm the only one who's ever distracted at Mass. You can look across and you can see somebody else, and hopefully you're saying, I don't know them. Or maybe I do know them. The real presence of Christ is there. You know, that's really important. The geography of this home and how it's established lends itself to that. Now bring it back to your own situation, your day-to-day routine. Where else would you see something like this? The dinner table. The dinner table. It doesn't have to be Thanksgiving or Christmas. Now that our 3 kids are gone, you know where my wife and I eat dinner mostly? Take a guess. Standing in front of the TV. We do. But we're together. A lot of times we'll sit on the back deck and just eat, or if it's something that's a bad day or a good day, we'll sit at the table still, and talk. And hopefully you do that. I know it's not always easy, especially if you've got kids in practice or going here and going there. Sometimes you eat on the car on the way there, I get it. But what happens here? You're forced to look at each other. You're breaking bread. You're talking. That's really important. And that, in a way, is a sacramental in and of itself. So if I could be so bold as to say, what are some good ideas? I'll give you just 3 ways I think that are really important to build up your domestic church. And the first is this. If you have sacramentals, display them. If they're already on display, point them out. If you have kids at home, say, do you know why we have that there? What does it mean to you? Let's have a conversation. Next time they grumble because it's their turn to do the dishes, say, do you know people eat off that? People don't have food. Talk about it as if it's a sacred thing, because it is. And the culture changes, the mindset changes, it shifts. So display sacramentals in your home and talk about them, explain them. And this is really prevalent when we have holidays, isn't it? I mean, you put decorations out for a reason. How many of you will put up a nativity set at Christmas? Yeah. Don't just put it up, talk about it. Explain it. You know where I got this? Your grandpa gave me this. Or whatever. There's all that tradition, that means something. It means something. The second idea to build up the domestic church, I would say, is to make mealtime sacred to the extent that you can. I know that's not always easy. I get it. But when you can, make it sacred. I'll even go so far as this. Challenge this. Our kids know this, and I'm not saying it's a great thing, it's just something that we do, is when we're out in public, we go to Culver's or something like that, we're saying grace before we eat. We just do. We don't like to say it loudly, we kind of subtle about it, but we do it. You know, don't be ashamed of that. It's easy to pray up there, because everybody else is. Not easy to do it at Culver's, because someone might see me. You know? But that's your faith. That's what we're called to do. We're called to bring that, to be examples of it, if you will. But make your mealtime sacred. Share your blessings, share your days, your good things, your struggles, everything. That's important. And then the last one, pray together. Pray as you can, not as you can, but pray. If you don't have the time to pray the rosary together, for instance, then don't, but pray. I love that line. Pray as you can, not as you can't, but pray. Find somehow to pray. Even if it means just blessing. I said this to Sue yesterday. I was here yesterday, and I suffer from migraines, and I have one right now. I've had it for about 3 days now. And my wife knows this. I have medicine for it. It's just one of those things I can't deal with. It is what it is. But it was really bad yesterday. And so she did something she rarely does. In 30 years of marriage, she came up to me, she actually blessed my forehead and said, I hope that the pain goes away. And I'm like, I was blown away by that. I was like, whoa. That was not something, I don't know what prompted her to do it, but I was glad that she did it. It meant a lot. Did my headache go away? No, because this is not magic. But it's something that told me not just something about her, but what she believes. And that's really important. So pray together, even if it means blessing each other. Our kids, my middle daughter in particular, is very fond about keeping the church and any kind of religion at arm's length right now. But she had surgery 1.5 years ago, and we both were there, and we blessed her, and we prayed with her. And she just kind of sat there, and she's cool with it. She just takes it, but she's like, you can pray, but I'm not going to pray with you. I'm like, that's fine, we're going to pray. And she says, well, that's just mom and dad being mom and dad. So don't stop. Keep doing it. Remember the Holy Family, okay? Remember the Holy Family. They're your example. All right. I'm going to leave you with a few, 2 more Bible verses here, and then some just really quick brief. Do I have time still? Are we good?
Yes. Yeah, like
Okay.
5 more minutes.
All right. St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians. We're no longer strangers. We're members of the household of God. And we're built on that foundation of the disciples and the apostles, and Christ is the capstone. So your family is an extension of the larger family, the Catholic Christian family that we have. Not just at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, but around the world. And through time. Through time. John said, in my Father's house there are many dwelling places. I just love this. This is what we all go for. This is why we do this with our families. This is why we go to Mass. Because eventually we want to be in that dwelling place. We want to be in the Father's house. This is not just the now, here and now, while I'm physically in the flesh here. It's for eternity that we do this, and that's what we hope for. So what I'd like to do is this. I'm going to end with 3 different points that I'm going to use kind of like prayerfully. I'm going to say them and just give you about 30 seconds to 30 seconds to think about them. Prayerfully contemplate them relative to the things that we talked about today. Okay, sound good? Mm-hmm. So just quietly as I put these up, I'll read them and then you can just think about them in your heart, in your mind. In what ways is your home a domestic church? A community of grace, prayer, and virtue? What sacramentals in your home are most important to you? And how do they help remind you of God's grace? What custom can your family practice to encourage greater faith among its members? Do you have any questions or comments or thoughts? Anything I said that like, wait, I didn't get that at all? Or just anything? Questions at all? Did it make sense? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your attentiveness, and I appreciate, and we'll pray for all of you as families. This is not easy stuff, but it's something we're called to do. So, God bless all of you.